I've been young, I've been old, I've been hurt and consoled, heart of cold, heart of gold, so I'm told.
Hey everybody, it's SevsDeadSerious again, and today we have a brand new day, brand new week, and as usual, I read a number of newspapers. I read the Washington Post. I think I've said this before: Washington Post, New York Times, Philadelphia Inquirer, New York Times, etc., all great newspapers. And one of the columnists, who's actually extremely well-educated man, is a man by the name of Charles Krauthammer. And Charles Krauthammer has become kind of the poster child for the conservatives. He's Sean Hannity's buddy, and he's Bill O'Reilly's buddy, and he goes on all these shows. And again, he is now espousing again, and he, as he does frequently, he doesn't like Obama, as most conservatives do not like Mr. Obama. And certainly, I'm not going to sit there and say that Mr. Obama has been a great president, because he hasn't been. He has been decidedly average, maybe even arguably below average. But one thing that he has done is he's managed to keep us out of wars. And one of the things that Charlie Krauthammer is now espousing is that we need to get our butts into Syria. And I guess and he claims that the problem is it's the rising tide of all of these Muslim countries, even though he refers to it as a Muslim Brotherhood, which I always get a kick out of, that we're really worried about these clowns, and they are kind of clowns. They don't have a lot. It's not that they can do anything. And what we're doing over in the Middle East anyway has nothing to do with protecting democracy or any other crap. It's about oil. Simply that. And it's one thing that Krauthammer doesn't point out in his, here's his op-ed right here, can't wish war away. Well, yeah, but you don't have to necessarily get into it. The sad thing is about guys like Charles Krauthammer, they've never served in the military. They've never been to a war zone. They've never actually had a gun in their hand, even though they espouse war as if it was something that just happens overnight. If you take a look at what they really want to do there, it's called nation building. We want to go in there and make every country a democratic nation. And that's just not going to happen. These are not countries. And again, this thing was messed up over 100 years ago. Because what you did is you took, again, and I've said this before, you've taken nomadic peoples, and then you put borders and stuff, and these wars that are not, and that's what he doesn't understand, is this is a holy war between Shiites and Sunnis. Now, he's a fairly intelligent guy. I mean, he graduated, which I always get a kick out of. He graduated from Harvard Medical School. He's a psychiatrist. Why is he suddenly an expert on foreign policy in this? Now, I guess he has won a Pulitzer Prize for the Reagan Doctrine, and now he refers to Obama's as the Dorothy Doctrine, as in Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, when you click your heels together, it'll all go away. Well, it's not going to go away. And the sad fact is, in Syria, there are already 70,000 dead. But I don't think it's going to change anything any more than Bush's war in Iraq changed anything there. Because if you notice, things are back to the way it was before. We don't have a despotic leader, but the Sunnis and Shiites are killing each other. Wholesale all throughout the country. It's a country in total disarray. Take a look at Afghanistan. Once we pull out all the troops, things are going to go exactly back to what they were. We can't afford, and that's the sad thing is that on one hand, guys like Charlie Krauthammer are espousing this great war. We need to go in. We need to have the no-fly zone. We need to hold our own against the Russians. This is the Cold War revisited, et cetera, et cetera. Who's paying for it? On one hand, Charlie's screaming that the deficit is out of control. We've got to do something about it. And then he wants us to go to war again. Where's the common sense in this? There isn't any. It's almost laughable. You're going to go in there and spend billions of dollars. First of all, you're going to go in there and you're going to create a huge problem. If you go into a no-fly zone, first of all, to have a no-fly zone, you have to be willing to go out there and do something to stop them from flying. And that means bombing where the airplanes are. And how are we going to do that without killing people? And again, now you turn it into, now we haven't committed troops to the ground. He doesn't say to commit troops to the ground. but eventually you're going to have to. I mean, that's the problem with war. There's no such thing as limited war. You either fight a war or you don't. We should have learned that lesson in Vietnam. Obviously, Mr. Krauthammer never read about Vietnam. You either fight a war to win it or you don't fight. Wars aren't meant to be tied. Because when you go to try to tie a war, you lose the war. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. You have a huge deficit you want to do something about. On the other hand, you want to build that deficit even further with, another military incursion into a place that we have no more business to protect our right to get oil there. Well, wait a minute. What about all this? What about all this homegrown oil we supposedly have that all these conservatives believe that we should be out tapping in all of these natural resource, in national parks and everything else, floating oil and all this other stuff. But in fact, we still are going over there and we're protecting our right to get as much oil as we can over there. And it just doesn't make, and again, it doesn't make any sense at all. We have something called authorization for use of military force, which many conservatives call for. Obama wants to repeal that. Because, see, at this point, what you can do is you can authorize to use military force without the 1973 Congress War Powers Act. In other words, you can't get into a war until Congress approves it. Now, I don't believe that Congress is going to approve it. And then you become sort of dictatorial if you go on send in troops. And, why is it that fighter pilots and pilots flying to protect a no-fly zone are not called troops? He says in the article, we won't be committing troops. Well, I was attached to the fighter wing on an aircraft carrier, and last time I checked, there's pilots in there. And they would be called troops. So in other words, we're going to send another 30, 40, 50,000, 100,000 men eventually, because eventually it's going to happen. Somebody's going to come along, they're going to escalate it, then we're going to have to escalate back, and next thing you know, because the Russians aren't going to stop sending stuff to the Syrians. I'm sorry about what's happening in Syria. But take a look. If we go in there and start arming, who are we arming? We have no idea. We don't know who's the good guys and who's the bad guys. And frankly, this may be one of the situations where two groups of bad guys that we don't want to have weapons will be going to war with each other. And whoever wins, they're all going to just tell us to go, pound sand, so to speak. It doesn't make sense. War doesn't make sense. It's easy to sit there and spout off like many of these politicians, including Obama, including Krauthammer, including Riley. None of these men ever served. They've never been to a war zone. They have no idea what it's like. No, they easily will send their neighbors, not their own children, because guys like that never, ever, ever. They find a way to keep their children out. I say institute the draft. I mean, if you're going to go out and fight these never-ending wars of nation building, because that's basically what it's called. It's called nation building. We're going to go in there. We're going to try to impose our will on whatever country we're going to. We're going to impose that will. We're going to have them elect our government. We're going to have a democracy, et cetera, et cetera. Well, first of all, it's not a democracy, Charlie. It's called a republic. We are a republic. We are not a democracy, okay? If you look up the two words, you'll see exactly what I mean by that. And this is the next problem, And then I don't understand it. I lost people I knew in Vietnam. I know people who've served in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I know people who've died in Iraq and Afghanistan. It never works. You're not going to stop anything. We've already proven that of Afghanistan and Iraq, that you're not going to do anything. Iran, you can't do anything about them. What are you going to do? After Syria, what are we going to do? Attack Iran? And then who's next? This war is a regional war, and allow them to fight it. The French and the British, for all intents and purposes, allowed us to fight our civil war. And in the process, millions died, wounded, and it was a horrible, horrible, horrible war. And it eventually, was over. But no one else stuck their nose into it. And eventually we ended it ourselves. The same thing will happen in Syria eventually. And, and it will happen despite what we do. So for us to commit troops, and then he goes into this is ridiculous. And then he goes into Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay. What are we going to do about Guantanamo Bay? No one knows. It's easy to go out there and say, well, he didn't know 4 years ago and he still doesn't know. Nobody knows. Some of the men in there have conspired against the United States. And as long as there's a war on terrorism, then you can continue to hold them. And hey, listen, it's, the sad thing is it doesn't matter where you hold them, but you have to hold a lot of them. And yes, if you free some of them, they're going to come back to haunt you. That's already happened. But that doesn't, arresting and throwing these people into jail isn't going to stop these religious wars. And if Charlie, instead of studying psychiatry, would have studied history, he would have seen, how did that whole Crusades thing work? Not very well. Matter of fact, it didn't work at all. It cost England millions of dollars by the day. Whatever. And again, I apologize for not doing a comparative monetary analysis of the Crusades in today's dollars. I don't know, but it was horrible. They lost, people died. It was costly. You don't just leave England and travel down to the Middle East, and it didn't work. Anytime you stick your nose into religion, it's not going to work. So what you do is you just stand back and hope like hell things work out well. We've got to be a little bit more aware of what's going on in our own country. Instead of spending billions of dollars stopping the Muslim Brotherhood and the problems in Mali and Algeria, and start building new roads, building bridges, building schools, reducing the deficit, whatever things you want to do, war should not be one of them. You can't win it. This is just one of those wars you can't win. This is Vietnam. This is Iraq. This is Afghanistan. This is Korea. None of these wars were won. None of them. How many Americans died in all of those wars? 56,000 in Vietnam. Over 50,000 in Korea. How many in Iraq and Afghanistan? 10s, 20s, 30,000? When does it all stop? It's easy. It's easy for guys like Krauthammer to stand there and send American troops, boots on the ground, Daryl Lacey, boots on the ground. It's easy to send them over there because you have no attachment to it. It's not your kid over there. It's not your next door neighbor over there. But instead, you will go out and you will send our troops. And he's the same guy who complains about drones. I love drones. What's the best thing about drones? Nobody's going to get killed. That's a good guy. There's no pilot. You got some guy sitting in Houston, behind one of those video game consoles, and he's killing people with his drone. That's perfect. I got no problem with that. Send over millions of drones. Then do whatever you got to do. No more boots on the ground, or boots in the plane, or boots anywhere. Find another way for oil. We still can't get it through our thick heads. We are sitting on we're North America. If we were to look down south, there is oil, there is natural resources, there are peoples, there is all sorts of things where we should be concentrating our efforts as an international power to help them. Because I'll tell you something, that's going to be the wave of the future in this country. Because eventually, this whole Middle East thing is just going to completely blow up. Eventually. Do you want to be there when it happens? Listen, this was a very serious rant because it's something that really bothers me a lot. And that is war. And you can't win with war. You can't ever win with war. I hope you all go to SevsDeadSerious.com and really give me some hints and stuff what you want to hear. Because I'll tell you something. I love to talk, and Lord knows I love to talk about what you want me to talk about. So give me a call. Drop me a note. Thank you very much. Peace.